Hey artists! Welcome to another tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how I painted this gorgeous blue cat's eye. Now, like usual, I am painting with oils, but you can get the same effect with acrylics, though I highly recommend working with a slow drying medium. I worked exclusively with acrylics for years, and the slow drying medium was a total game changer. Now, if you want to improve your animal art, then you're definitely going to want to check out my free guide, 5 tips for improving your animal art. You can grab that free guide in the description of this video. Now, if you're craving more help and want the full real-time tutorial complete with my voice walking you through every single moment, paint mixing recipes, reference photos, and more, I think you will love the Wildlife Painting Academy. New tutorials are added each month, and it truly is your secret weapon for learning how to paint realistic wildlife easily. You can check it out in the description of this video. So I'm starting off with my darkest tones here. I'm going in with some black, and basically what I'm doing is I'm blocking in where those darkest parts of my painting are going to be. So I've got that sort of rim going around the eye. I'm going to be blocking in the pupil and a couple of markings in that fur. So now that I've got those darkest parts kind of mapped out, I'm going to go ahead and start to add a little bit of color here. So I'm still working with a really dark brown. I'm using a big brush and stroking in a little bit of that dark brown to start to build up our fur. So now I'm going to start working a little more towards the light side of the spectrum. So I'm going to be adding a little bit more white to my paint here. And now that I have the darkest parts of my painting mapped out, it's going to make it a lot more easy for me to build up a realistic painting that's still really nice and dynamic. So now I'm starting to stroke in the lighter colors in that fur. So we've got that sort of creamy marking that I'm going to have rimming the eye, and then I'm also going to have some of the other fur as well. Now I was getting tired of looking at that blank staring eye in the center, so it's time to add some color. I've got that dark black pattern already on the top for that nice dramatic cast shadow, but I'm gonna go ahead and start to add some really dark blue to really make that color pop and create a really beautiful, vibrant effect that really shows the fact that these eyes are 3D and they capture the light in such a beautiful way. So I'm going in now with a medium toned blue, and I'm using it to sort of transition from that cast shadow into where the iris is going to be reflecting a lot more light, so it's going to be a lot lighter. But I want to have a bit of a transition there, so I'm still going with a pretty dark blue. Now I'm starting to add a little bit more light in this iris here. So I'm adding more titanium white to my paint to make it a little lighter, and we're going to start to build up more of that light pattern and also the texture that's going to be happening inside the iris. So I'm adding even more light blue paint here to really build up that light pattern inside this eye. So I was pretty happy with my underpainting so far, but now it's time for details. Now the fun really begins. So I'm going to start by going in with some dark brown here, and I'm basically using the bristles on my brush with a really light hand, letting those individual bristles kind of touch my canvas, leaving individual lines. That's going to help to build up a fur texture really easily. So starting with that dark paint, and then we're going to be building up to lighter paint as we go. So I wanted to make sure that those black markings I wanted in that fur were gonna be a little more established. They kind of got a little lost when I was creating my underpainting. So I'm just gonna go and stroke in a couple of black hairs that are gonna, add some dimension to this fur. So we started our detailing phase of this fur with our dark paint, but I really think it starts to come together once we jump in with that lighter paint. So now I'm grabbing kind of a nice creamy brown color. There's a lot more white in this paint, so it's gonna be a lot brighter. And I'm gonna start to build up that fur texture. So now that I managed to add that sort of light creamy brown color to all of the fur here, it's starting to really shape up, but we want to add even more 3D shape here, really pay attention to the form and just add more fur detail. So now I'm going in with an even lighter paint. So I'm adding a lot more titanium white here, and I'm using my brush here to stroke in those individual hairs. So here I'm just using a filbert brush that's a little beat up, and basically the bristles are a little bit splayed, so they are building up a lot of that texture for me. All right, so we have a really solid foundation for our fur now, and now is when we can actually go in with our detailing brushes and really turn this into something that is realistic and dynamic, and frankly just makes you want to reach through the screen and pet this super cute cat eye and fur. It's gonna look so realistic. So grab your small detailing brush, and now going in with your lightest paint, you can actually start to stroke in those individual hairs. That is totally gonna turn up that dial and make everything look so much more realistic. So one thing to keep in mind when we are painting realistic animals, and this is really important, is the direction that the fur flows in is so important. If you're flowing those brush strokes in a direction that kind of goes against where that fur is actually supposed to be flowing, it's gonna look bizarre, and the viewer, the person that's gonna be looking at your artwork, is gonna see that and it's gonna be like, oh, okay, that doesn't really look right. Something looks a little wrong here. And we obviously don't want that. We're putting in a lot of effort to, paint realistic animals. We want it to look right. So keep a close eye on your reference photo and always try to analyze those photos to see which direction that hair is flowing in. So our fur is looking awesome. Now it's time to jump into adding some gorgeous detail and texture into the iris of this cat. So I'm starting with a really nice dark blue in the center, and I'm kind of creating a bicycle spoke pattern. Imagine these lines that are radiating outwards from the center of that pupil. So that's kind of what I'm going for here with my brush. And again, I'm letting a rough sort of beat up brush do a lot of the work for me here. Those rough bristles, they can be really helpful. So yeah, this is a great opportunity to use some of your brushes that have seen a lot of love and, might not be in their best shape anymore. So now I'm building up a little bit more of that detail and texture, but this time with lighter blue paint. So now I'm grabbing those tiny little detail brushes again and adding some really gorgeous texture and details into that iris. And this is really going to turn it up a notch and just really make it so beautiful and captivating. So now it's time for a little glazing magic. I wanted to add a little bit of variation in the color of this fur. I want there to be some warmth kind of happening around the eye, just adding a little bit of color to that fur that isn't really present right now. And then I also want to go and add a beautiful cast shadow to that eye and dial up that blue. So I'm going ahead and mixing up a glaze and getting, that color right. So last but definitely not least, we've got to be able to put in that highlight that is going to make this eye totally transform. Eyes are very shiny, they're wet, so they reflect a lot of light, and because they're spherical, the lens on the actual eye is spherical, it's going to reflect the light around this animal in a really neat pattern. And adding in this highlight is going to totally transform your painting. So take the time to really add that beautiful highlight, and yeah, it's going to totally transform this eye that you've been working so hard on. So I'm going in with a tiny detail brush here and adding some brighter pops of light here that are just going to make it sparkle. And finally, I'm going in and adding a couple final details that, I was kind of craving. I wanted this painting to have a little extra something, so I'm going in and adding those final details in. And we're done! Thank you so much for watching this tutorial on how to paint a beautiful blue cat eye. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.